And then in Indianapolis, word that King was dead. Lindsay saw Kennedy recoil at the news, as if he'd been struck physically. Kennedy got into a car with Fred Dutton, a campaign strategist. "What should I tell him, Fred?" he asked. Dutton didn't know what to say. Kennedy was staring out the window 1,000,000 miles away. Finally, Dutton told him, "You know what to say, Bob. Just speak from your heart," knowing that the advice was banal, but sensing that's what Kennedy was going to do anyway. Mankiewicz was thinking the same thing, but he wrote down some notes for Kennedy as he rode downtown on the press bus. He noticed, everyone noticed, that the police escort dropped off as they entered the black neighborhood. Adam Walensky, Kennedy's young speechwriter, had preceded the campaign staff to Indianapolis and was having dinner downtown when he heard that King had been shot. He immediately started drafting remarks for Kennedy on a yellow legal pad, then jumped in a car and headed for the rally. Walensky arrived at about the same moment as Kennedy. He noticed from a distance that Kennedy wasn't moving side to side, working the crowd as he normally did. He was plowing straight ahead, head down. "Senator," Walensky shouted, and pulled the notes from his pocket. Kennedy, who was wearing a dark blue raincoat, gave Walensky a grim look and a quick, curt hand signal. No, he wouldn't be needing any words that night. Walensky saw Kennedy pull some notes from his own pocket, which he'd probably scribbled in the car from the airport. Mankiewicz, in the back of the crowd, saw Kennedy up on the podium and wondered if Bobby could keep it all together, keep his composure, say the right thing, and calm the crowd, which still, remarkably, wasn't aware of King's death. And then, for the next 4 minutes and 57 seconds, Robert Kennedy spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began rather formally, respectfully, "I'm only going to speak to you for 1 or 2 minutes tonight because I have sad news." His voice caught, and he turned it into a slight cough, a throat clearing. The crowd hadn't quite settled in yet. His supporters were still waving signs. "Could you lower those signs over there?" he asked, and the crowd quieted. "I have sad news for you, for all of our fellow citizens, and for people who love peace all over the world." He paused, his voice still uncertain, then gathered himself up and said, "And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee." There were screams, wailing, just the rawest, most visceral sounds of pain that human voices can summon. As the screams died, Kennedy resumed slowly, pausing frequently, measuring his words. "Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings, and he died in the cause of that effort." There was total silence now. Rather than exploding, rather than indulging their anger, the crowd was rapt. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it is perhaps well to ask what kind of nation we are and what direction we want to move in. For those of you who are black, considering the evidence, he stumbled here. Evidently there were white people who were responsible. A shudder through the crowd at the powerful, unadorned word, responsible. You can be filled with bitterness, with hatred, and a desire for revenge. We can move in that direction as a country, in great polarization. Black people amongst blacks and white people amongst whites, filled with hatred toward one another. Or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and comprehend. He paused, perhaps considering whether or not to take the next step, whether to lay himself bare before that crowd. The next few phrases seemed to be place-holding, preparation as he gathered himself emotionally. "And to replace the stain of bloodshed that has spread across our land with an effort to understand, with compassion and love." Then he plunged ahead. "For those of you who are black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and distrust of the injustice of such an act against all white people," he paused again. "I can only say that I feel," his voice broke, "in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man." Walensky's head snapped up. He had been working for Kennedy for 5 years and had never heard him speak before, publicly or even privately, of the death of his brother. It was just too painful, a place Kennedy would not go, a topic skidded away from whenever anyone came close to raising it. No one who knew him ever spoke of it in his presence, and yet here he was, tentatively. He still could not say the words, "my brother." It was a member of my family. And somewhat confusedly, why did the race of his brother's assassin matter? Stripping himself before strangers, evaporating the distance between himself and the crowd. They were suffering together now. You could hear it in the quality of the silence, which seemed a conscious, cooperative thing, a group achievement. We have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond these rather difficult times. And now he drew them closer still. My favorite poet was Aeschylus. He once wrote, "Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the human heart." He paused, still speaking softly, his voice shaking a bit as he caressed every word. Again, the silence of the crowd was stunning. Until, in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God. He proceeded briskly from there with a poetic lilt to his phrasing. What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence or lawlessness, but love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice for those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black. Someone shouted, "Yay!" There were other shouts which melted into a warm, buttery round of applause. Kennedy seemed to exhale. Let us dedicate ourselves to what the Greeks wrote so many years ago, to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. Let us dedicate ourselves to that and say a prayer for our country and for our people. Over the next few days there were riots in 76 American cities. Indianapolis remained quiet. I was a senior in college when Kennedy delivered that speech. He passed away the week I graduated. His death was, for me, the saddest of the trinity of killings that punctured my youth. I'd been shocked by President Kennedy's death and outraged by Martin Luther King's, but Bobby's passing marked not only the end of my school days, but also the beginning of a darker, less idealistic time. Having come of age in a decade breathless with nobility, the incredible courage of the freedom riders and other civil rights workers, the soaring rhetoric of the Kennedys and King, I entered the world of work bereft, heroless. A year later, I began my career as a political reporter. I've covered all or part of 8 presidential campaigns since then. I tried to quit the business after the endless, depressing 2000 race. When people ask why I keep coming back for more, I try and make a joke of it. They don't have 12-step programs for political junkies. But that's not it, not entirely. There's also the memory of Robert Kennedy. Not that I expect to see another campaign as gracious, eloquent, and true as his brief flight. Kennedy's situation was unique. He had been liberated by suffering and family legacy. The personal doubts and rigorous internal moral colloquy that had burdened him throughout his life suddenly became a sword. But 35 years later, I still find myself hoping for Kennedy-like moments of spontaneity and courage from the politicians I trail after. Moments when they deviate from their script and betray a real emotion. Moments when they tell their supporters an inconvenient truth or force their detractors to think in a different way. I've been lucky enough to experience a few such moments in each of the presidential campaigns I've covered, but they come less frequently now, almost always in the early primaries when the crowds are sparse. Practically never in a general election campaign when the entire nation is watching, and any wisp of unscripted humanity, a gesture, a sigh, as Al Gore found out in 2000, can prove disastrous. This is about that loss of spontaneity and what it has cost us. In Kennedy's Indianapolis speech, there is a deep respect for the audience, which is not present in modern American politics. It isn't merely that he quotes Aeschylus to the destitute and uneducated, although that is remarkable enough. Kennedy's respect for the crowd is not only innate and scrupulous, it's also structural, born of technological innocence. He doesn't know who they are, not scientifically the way postmodern politicians do. The audience hasn't been sliced and diced by his pollsters, their prejudices and policy priorities cross-tabbed, the turns of phrase most efficient to their ears focus-grouped. He hasn't been told what not to say to them. I had a member of my family killed, and he was killed by a white man, he says. One of Kennedy's speechwriters might have made it more direct. My brother was killed by a white man, too. No doubt the gratuitous "by a white man" would have been eliminated. But because of its diffidence and awkwardness, the line remains one of the most memorable and